Welcome to Unraveling Midlife. I'm your host, Sarah Spence. Thanks for joining me as I explore my own astrological midlife by speaking with all sorts of inspiring people about their life and work. Astrological midlife relates to Western astrology transits that run from the mid-30s to the mid-40s for everyone. Each of the four main midlife transits have an overall theme, though details vary by generation and by individual. I recommend listening to episodes 9 and 20 for more in-depth discussion on these. If you're new to the show, welcome. You can follow me on social media as Sarah Marlowe Spence, and you're welcome to subscribe to the show if you haven't already. At the end of the episode, I share a track of my original music. You've arrived here to this episode as we're heading into Christmas 2022, with the Capricorn new moon just recently gone, and plenty of change in the heavens. Now, change is inevitable, and the next few months herald even more astrological changes. I'm curious to see what eventuates. Saturn will move into Pisces and Pluto into Aquarius as the New Zealand summer fades into autumn. It'll be the tail end of festival season then, which, as this show goes to air, is just about to begin. The conscious festival scene has been a part of my summer traditions from before my Saturn return, i.e. my late 20s, and back when I started, I was one of the young ones. Now I feel like part of the wisdom crowd, a little more mature, as the influx of those interested in these festivals seems to be growing exponentially and ever younger. This year I'll be at a few more than usual, which I'm looking forward to. So if you happen to see me at any of them, please say hi. I'll be playing music and facilitating dream workshops for sure, confirmed at Resolution Festival north of Auckland, New Zealand Spirit South Island near Christchurch, Evolve Festival in Nelson, and Earthbeat Festival at Achu Creek, again north of Auckland. And perhaps more yet to add to the list, we shall see. Now, this episode is number 25, which as a quarter of 100 is worth celebrating. I started planning this podcast as a creative passion project just over 2 years ago. It's provided a source of richness in life that I would otherwise not have, and I hear the same from others on occasion. It's a great feeling when a listener I don't know comes up and says, "I listened to your podcast and I really love it." Like, yay! And if you'd like to help celebrate and find that this show adds value to your life, perhaps consider rating it if you're on Apple or sharing it with others who might enjoy it. Today's guest is Teagan Fea. We met through the festival scene, funnily enough, via her hypnotherapy workshop, and I was on the workshop team for a festival that, so we looked at her website and went, wow, we have to have this lady. Teagan is a rapid transformation therapy practitioner, a clinical hypnotherapist, and a natural success coach. And she started out by jumping ship from corporate IT with a very solid yoga background. Apart from being an all-around lovely human, Teagan has an incredible astrological midlife story that you'll hear today, and it both surprised me and kept me spellbound. Before we head into our conversation, here is a quote from her website that I felt I really just had to share with you. "One of my greatest joys is to help a person to feel good about who they are and to realize that they are amazing. Life is too short and too precious to not love who you are." Teagan, welcome to Unraveling Midlife. It's great to have you here.
Oh, it's lovely to be here, Sarah. Thank you so much.
So, I mean, how did your midlife unravel? What's happening in your life right now? Tell me about yourself before we get right into the detail.
Okay, cool. So I'm probably 10 years past midlife. But originally I was born in Australia and I came out to New Zealand when I was 3 years old. And so I was born in Australia, brought up in New Zealand, and I ended up, when I was 30, I became a yoga teacher after a long career in corporate. And I became a twice qualified yoga teacher over a number of years. And then I became a life coach with a foundation in somatic psychotherapy. And I ended up running yoga retreats all over Australia and in other countries. And I loved being a full-time yoga teacher, and it was my passion. And then I ended up working for an organization in Australia, working with clients with mental health issues, and they were long-term unemployed. And my whole working life became this fascinating research project for me about the mind and how the mind influences emotions and how it influences the way that we experience ourselves and the world. And I ended up retraining in 2016. I became a clinical hypnotherapist. And when I came back from New Zealand, I lived in Mexico for a few years. I lived in Australia for 18 years, then moved to Mexico and came back to New Zealand and became a clinical hypnotherapist and worked for an organization called Mindfulness Works, teaching mindfulness to people in Auckland. So I taught about 3,500 people mindfulness over the last 4 to 5 years. And so that's kind of what I do now, is I teach mindfulness in the corporate space. I work with clients all over the world as a clinical hypnotherapist, and I still take people away on retreats. So mainly women. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah, right. Yeah, I remember talking with you once and you're like, oh, and I left corporate, or you were doing corporate. I'm like, okay, wow, corporate, twice qualified yoga teacher. We have some things in common, but you managed to leave corporate.
I know I did. I really made that big leap of faith and jumped off the cliff and landed on my feet, which was amazing.
Yeah, I do have to wonder, like, when I hear stories like that, is it easier, do you think? I mean, clearly you can only do it once, to make that jump, because you were in Australia when you made that jump, is that right?
Yeah. I was in Australia working as an IT project manager. And I think, you and I have that IT background in common as well. And I was earning ridiculous money. So, a lot of people were just like, oh my God, are you crazy leaving this to become a yoga teacher? But I just did it. I just took that leap. And no, it wasn't easy, because what I found was that, when I was working full time, I was fully distracted and around people all of the time. And then I went to working for myself and having a lot of time on my hands. And my classes were mainly in the evening, so I spent a lot of time on my own during the day. And then I was teaching 10 to 12 classes a week. And mentally, I fell apart. And physically, I fell apart.
That's a lot of classes.
Yeah, it was a lot of classes. And so it was a massive transformation for me.
I wondered if it would be easier to do in Australia than New Zealand, because there's a bigger population base, so therefore it would be easier to get that amount of classes and live on that. And also, but it must have been harder, because IT is stupid money in Australia. It's nowhere near as stupid in New Zealand, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that kind of helped a little bit, but I totally relate with that, going from even remote working in the last couple of years, like not having people to talk to in the kitchen or at the water cooler. It drives me a bit batty.
Oh, yeah, it's intense. But, when I started teaching yoga, they didn't have many yoga schools. So back then in the day, you had to go and do a mentorship with a teacher. And so there weren't many yoga teachers around. And I got involved with the first diploma program that came in Australia. It was the very first one of its kind, that then pushed out 23 teachers into the Melbourne community. But at the time, there were so many students, and there weren't yoga teachers on every corner. So it was really, my classes were always full. And of course, yeah, I was just going to say, of course, over the years, now there's a yoga teacher on every corner.
I wondered if that, I was actually going to say, like, in the GFC, everyone decided to retrain, and I was teaching yoga at the time after my day job. And I really found that there was a point where there were so many yoga teachers. I used to know people go, oh, you're a yoga teacher. Do you know so-and-so? I'm like, oh, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
But then there were so many yoga teachers, and there are, So what happened at that point? Does that kind of come into your story about, like, clearly you probably have some yoga in your life with retreats and all of that, but you
Mm-hmm.
started with the yoga and then went into hypnotherapy and
Yeah.
coaching and different kinds of hypnotherapy as well. So how did that happen?
Well, I was really blessed because I did my first yoga teacher training course, and then I I really went through an existential crisis with yoga because I saw people being injured, and Iyengar was really big in Australia and Ashtanga. And I started to question it, and I didn't feel the juice of yoga at the time. I was like, there's something missing for me around this. And I didn't understand why people were injuring themselves. And so I ended up doing an apprenticeship for 4 years with one of Jessica Char's principal students. And luckily enough, she lived in Melbourne, and I got this in-depth training in yoga therapy, but in particular in the way that the yogis perceive the mind, and the yoga scriptures about mind and how to heal mind. And I had this beautiful link between mind and body because I was an ex-dancer as well. And I went really, really deep into that in a big way, and then of course I studied somatic psychotherapy through some coaching training that I was doing. And then that took it to another level because it was all about working through the body and with psychotherapy. So it just, my skill base just kept growing and growing and growing. And so, yes, it absolutely influenced my my career choice. And I ended up leaving full-time teaching because my big thing has always been about helping people to really dive deep into the heart and to really allow them to access their divinity or the truth of who they are beyond their trauma and beyond their perceptions of themselves. And in Australia, when Ashtanga just became so big, people were just wanting a yoga mat, and they weren't really interested in those beautiful, softer practices. And I think, I don't know, you may agree with this, and that often when people start yoga, they start with the very physical practices, and then over time, as you evolve, you start to lean more into the more meditative side of yoga as you grow and evolve spiritually. Yeah, so that's how it happened for me. Yeah. And then, I kind of got bored with psychotherapy. When I came back to New Zealand, I was like, God, there has to be something more than this that gets and cuts through a lot quicker. And I found Marissa Peer's work, and a lot of people follow Marissa, and I trained with her in rapid transformational therapy, which is a type of hypnotherapy. And then I became a clinical hypnotherapist here in New Zealand, and then trained with a very well-known hypnotherapist in Australia. So I've just, my whole journey really has been just building on that toolkit. I've literally worked with thousands of people over the years, and you just grow and grow and grow as a therapist, and come up with your own style. Yeah.
And so how did all that transition from yoga teacher to the rapid transformational therapy and the other hypnotherapy, how did that kind of work in with the astrological midlife that
Oh yeah. So what happened was, when I was about 39, I was living in Melbourne, Australia, and I had this really intuitive understanding and knowing that I was about to leave Australia. And I was so happy there. I'd lived there for 16 years, and it was my home. But I was told intuitively that I was about to leave. And I ended up going to the Himalayas when I was 41. And I did the Annapurna circuit for 3 weeks. And it was just absolutely profound. For me, it was a walking meditation. And it was probably one of the most strenuous things I've ever done in my life. And I met this man on a rooftop in Kathmandu, and it was just this beautiful, magical meeting. And I was chatting with him, and he said to me, And at that time, I'd gone back to corporate because I'd burnt out as a yoga teacher and a therapist probably 2 years before that. And he said to me, "Oh my God, you've got to get back to your work. You've got to go back to your work." And I'd actually burnt out. And when I burnt out, I ended up in hospital, and I nearly died. I had septicemia of the bowel and appendicitis, and I'd just been giving so much to my clients and teaching yoga, and it was all give, 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 give. And then I had nothing left to give. And I burnt out so badly that I deleted my database, and I never wanted to teach another yoga class again. And I never wanted to see another client again because I had nothing left in the tank. So I went back to corporate and ended up doing change management for a couple of years and training. And when I met this man on the rooftop of this balcony, and he said that to me, it just cracked something open within me. And I went back to Melbourne and gave up my job and said, I'm done. And once again, I was earning extraordinary money. And but I thought, no, I've got to get back to my truth. And then an email arrived in my inbox, and it was a trip to the Amazon. And it was with 12 people from around the world. It was called an Avatar adventure doing plant medicine. And I applied for it, and within 2 hours, I got a message back saying that I'd been accepted out of 200 people. They just got a big yes on it. And by the end of the day, I'd booked my ticket to Peru. So I went on this mad, crazy trip to Peru in 2011. And I went deep into the jungle, probably 9 hours away from Iquitos, way up this river where there were pink dolphins and anacondas and pythons up in the trees, no electricity. And I did ayahuasca for 2 weeks. I did about 5 ceremonies every third day. And I fell in love with this man in the Amazon. He was from Mexico. And I ended up, we ended up spending some time in Peru after the trip. And then he came out to Australia and came and stayed with me in Australia. And then I went to Mexico to see him, and him and I were invited to go back to the Amazon to facilitate another group. And so I went through more ayahuasca experiences. I went through another 7 trips. So this is all part of my midlife. Like, this is right smack bang in the middle of it.
That's a Neptune square spirituality journey.
I know, absolutely right. And then my last ayahuasca experience just almost shattered my psyche. And I went through this absolutely profound experience that took me 2 years to integrate. And I ended up, 3 months later, I moved to Mexico to be with my partner.
This is a classic, like they call that astrological midlife sometimes the midlife crisis, where people might buy a sports car. This sounds like Uranus opposition just kind of shaking. Okay, you're going to like move to the other side of the world, to a different culture. This is such a good story. Continue.
And it was just a wild ride. And everyone in Australia, well, a lot of people were saying to me, I can't believe you're just packing up your life and you're going to Mexico. I mean, Mexico of all places. But it felt so right to me. My intuition was just like, no, you've got to go. And so I arrived there. I didn't know Spanish and didn't have any Spanish whatsoever. And my partner and I lived in a place called Cuernavaca, which was an hour south of Mexico City. But I was integrating this ayahuasca experience. So, I went through this massive existential crisis where I was questioning my spirituality and questioning the divine and questioning who I was. And I was having these incredibly blissful experiences where I was waking up in bliss in the night and seeing bliss rolling off the hills because, your pineal gland gets quite, just cracked wide open. but it was intense, you know, it was just freaking intense, and it was frightening, and I didn't know what was happening to me. And I was in a strange country, and I went to university, and I was learning Spanish, and I was, you know, in a relatively new relationship, kind of integrating into Mexican life, and I ended up staying there for about 3.5 years and had this wild time over there.
How did you ground again from feeling that panic and split open? How did you find that grounding again?
Well, I tried to find someone who could help me, because you know, it's interesting with ayahuasca, and you know, I don't necessarily recommend it because of what I went through, and I, you know, I always did the big, you know, cleansing for 6 weeks before going on it, and meditating, and, you know, really doing it right and going in with the right intentions spiritually. But, you know, it completely, you know, I went into the dark and also into the light in the last ceremony that I had. And so afterwards, I felt like I was going to walk through the earth, and my whole physical reality completely shifted and changed. And I was having these incredible experiences, but there was nobody there to kind of take my hand and say, this is what's happening to you, and this is what you need to do. We need to ground you, and this is how we need to ground you. So none of that happened. So eventually, after trying to find my own answers, and it was a very, very lonely journey, I felt like I was walking on a knife edge between sanity and insanity for a good 2 years. I ended up finding a teacher by the name of Sally Kempton, and she is a wisdom goddess tantric yoga teacher who comes from the Baba Muktananda lineage. And so I did a 6-week course with her, focusing on wisdom goddess deity practice. So we worked with one of the goddess archetypes on a weekly basis. So Durga 1 week, and Lalita another week, and, you know, Parvati, and then I did a 2-month program with her after that on Kundalini. And because I was in this expanded state of awareness, the goddesses were appearing to me in the middle of the night and in my meditations. And I was having these profound conversations with them, and they got me back in my body. Yeah. So that's what grounded me, was that work, and I've been doing that work ever since. It's a big passion of mine. I've also worked with a teacher called Chamali Ardak, who's another great women's tantra teacher, and, you know, tantra as in the true word, not the sexual side, but as an embodied awareness.
And not neo.
Yeah, classical, yeah, from a yogini perspective. And so I've worked with Chamali and also worked with Sally Kempton, and I still do goddess practice today, wisdom goddess practice. Yeah, so they grounded me, basically. They got me back in my body and grounded and safe again. But, you know, the experience changed my life. You know, it completely transformed me in every possible way. And, you know, it completely shifted my consciousness. You know, my consciousness has completely changed, and I can tap back into that energy now quite easily. But, you know, it's not there all the time, but I can tap into it.
It's fascinating hearing people's experience with that kind of plant medicine. Yeah, especially in such detail and finding that way out of it. Yeah, it sounds like a life-changing experiences, I guess, plural.
Yeah, but, you know, there's a dark side to that medicine. And, you know, I've met many people since I had my experience, because when I went through my experience, I started to do a lot of research, because, you know, I didn't even know what ayahuasca was when I first went to the Amazon, and I was like, oh yeah, ayahuasca, never heard of it. I didn't know it was a psychedelic kind of drug until I really got there. But afterwards, when I went through my experience, I started to research, and there are actually lots of stories of people that lost their minds. And, you know, I met someone in Mexico who had done a lot of ayahuasca, who completely lost the plot for 2 years and thought she was going to die. So
kind of up there with mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms as well. Like I hear similar.
it's more intense. It's a lot more intense. Oh yeah, it's next level again.
Wow.
And so, you know, it's interesting because I've had people say to me, you know, would you recommend it? And I say, no, the risk is too great. And even though there's a lot of people out there that are doing ayahuasca and recommending it for trauma and things like that, there is a big risk with it. And people don't really understand and haven't really gone and researched that risk. So, you know, it's definitely, there's that risk there if people want to go and take it. Yeah.
I tend to go for non-psychedelic plant medicine in the form of
these
like flower essences, because honestly, like I find that taking them in their stock strength, like it can be a complete trip in itself without the psychedelics, but there's such an impact.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, taking ayahuasca is like a Kali experience.
Right.
It's like Kali comes in and she just goes, rah, I'm going to dismantle you completely.
Yeah.
But there are more gentle ways, right?
Yeah, of course. Kali being the goddess that like cuts heads off and eats brains and
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that kind of thing. Yes, they're definitely not kind of pious Mary type goddess.
No, exactly. There are definitely more gentle ways to shift and grow spiritually.
So you mentioned when you left Australia, you had a really strong intuitive feeling that you were going to leave. Can you talk a little bit more about intuition? Because I know that's some of what you work with people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, the yogis talk about the fact that we have a higher mind and a lower mind. And they say that, you know, that the lower mind is your intellectual mind. And it's called manas. It's your manas mind. And most of us live from this space, you know, and over the work that I've done with thousands of people, particularly around somatic awareness, many of us are disconnected from our bodies and disconnected from our intuitive nature. But our higher mind exists within the heart. And in yoga, we call it buddhi. And it's that beautiful, clear, crystal clear part of the self that's connected to everything in all time and space. And we're all highly intuitive. But what happens is we get these intuitive hits that are always coming to us from that deeper, higher source from within, our higher consciousness, I suppose you could call it. But then the intellectual mind, the lower mind, comes in straight away, and it analyzes, it tries to make sense, and then of course the person doesn't listen to those internal hits.
I have the perfect example. I looked at a vase that I'd changed so I could use it for something else, and I was going down the stairs and I looked and I thought, I should change that vase back. And I went, oh yeah, I'll do that later. Next day, a gust of wind blows the vase and smashes it to smithereens. And I'm like, damn it, why didn't I listen to that flash of insight?
yeah, that's a great example. Yeah. And this is how life works for us. And, you know, so many of us are in our ego identity, which is the part of our nature that, you know, that's a construct of what we've picked up as a child with all of our beliefs and all of the definitions, that false definitions that we've created about ourselves and others in life. And we live from that space, but we don't actually get to live from our greatness or the truth of who we are, which is a limitless creator being who, you know, if we were to listen to our intuition and really connect in and just be in the magic, be present and in the magic of life, and developing that connection with our intuition. And then, you know, if you learn to be in that space, then life just opens up and flows in the most incredible way. And then that's when things really start to shift and change, and it's really, really exciting.
I remember the first time I tried that, it was just, okay, I'm at a festival, and it was back when Prana Festival was the kind of urban hippie festival of the time on the Coromandel Peninsula. And I remember going, okay, can I just go with the flow? And it was so foreign. And I really had to overcome my mind of not kind of getting a schedule and going, I want to go to this workshop and that band and this and that and that. And I'm, okay, I'm just going to check in, see where the inner voice takes me. And it was such a cool experience. I haven't totally managed to get that in fully in the rest of life, because there are schedules and times, etc. But I think that's where it started for me. Yeah, it's really a great place to start experimenting if you're not already kind of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you tap into your delicious mind, where the mind's just, I love being in the delicious mind, because that's when the mind is calm and relaxed and focused on the now. So then the mind's not stressing, and it's not planning, and it's not striving, and then there's no anxiety in the body, and there's no stress, and there's no catastrophizing, and no worrying. And then you're just open. And then you can, and then you allow the higher mind to come through, and you tap into the flow. So where do I feel inspired to go next? Where's the inspiration? And then all of a sudden, these amazing experiences just start to happen. I had an experience the other day. It was such a beautiful experience. My friend was over from Australia, and she's recently, her son passed away in his sleep. It was a really, really sad story. But, we went out to Bethel's Beach, and we ended up swimming in the ocean. And it was the most beautiful day. And I was really tapping into the magic and just felt so free. And it was so beautiful. And we came back to the car park, and the cafe was there, and a band was about to play, and I didn't take my credit card out there because I thought we're just going for a walk. And Lou tried to buy some mango lassies, and they couldn't accept your credit card because it was Australian, and they were only accepting New Zealand EFTPOS cards. And so that's cool. We started walking back to the car, and then all of a sudden there was a knock on the window, and there was a woman there, and I wound down the window, and she said, "Can I buy you those mango lassies?" And it was so beautiful, and she said, "I heard what happened, and I'd really love to buy those lassies for you." And I just felt like we were in the magic, it just felt like we dropped into flow in life. And then this beautiful woman came in, and we had that delicious experience. And I love having those experiences because it makes you feel alive.
Really does.
It really does, hey. Like, you just live from this place of joy. And I feel like it's a little bit like being a kid in a candy store. And, you wake up in the morning and go, "Oh, I'm so excited about what's going to happen today, and the people I'm going to meet, and the amazing adventures I'm going to have, and the opportunities that are coming my way." And you're in this space of expectation. And so I really practice that in my own life. It is a practice, and it doesn't happen overnight. But it's very much being the witness of the mind, and pivoting back and noticing when the mind's going into that egoic story, and then, no, I'm making this change, and I'm making this choice to be present and to come into my heart space. Yeah. Yeah. And, I went to I spent some time back in Peru. I've been to Peru 3 times, and I went back in 2018, and I went on a journey with some shamans high up in the Southern Alps, not the Southern Alps, the Andes up there. And, there were this beautiful shamans that lived high up in this little village, way up in the Alps. And they said to us, "You Westerners, you live up here." They said, "We live here in our heart. We allow our heart to guide us," which is your higher mind, right? Your intuition. "And we use this as a tool." I knew that, but to hear it and to experience it in them, and to see the presence that they held and that heartfelt loving energy. And so I just vowed from that time to really practice as much as I can living from the heart space and teaching others to do that too.
And so how do you teach others? Is this part of like a private practice one-on-one? I mean, what kind of events have you got anything coming up? Or
yeah, well, I take people away. I take people away on retreat, and where we go really deep into the heart and heart-based practices. And it is very much about, I teach people how to recognize where they're not in the heart and how to recognize coming into the heart. But also I work with, I'm a coach as well. So I've trained with a man called William Whitecloud, he's a big international teacher in the space, and I coach, and I'm a natural success coach. So I work with people privately and help them to tune into their intuition and to lead their life from that space, but also to go into and connect in with what their soul wants to create in the world. And then we find out what their soul wants to create in the world. So I do a reading for them, an intuitive reading. A lot of this work is about me intuiting for them and them intuiting for themselves. And then I help them to look at their ego identity and where their ego identity is stopping them. So those core beliefs and those things, the obstacles, and then how to pivot back into living in the magic. So, and then in my hypnotherapy work, it's about releasing trauma and obstacles that are stopping somebody from really tuning into that part of themselves, their greatness and the truth of who they are. Yeah. So yeah, I run workshops throughout the year and bits and pieces, and I run a workshop about intuition and self-hypnosis, and I've got some other things that I've got up my sleeve. I'm actually going to be training people to do what I do next year.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. I've got a hypnotherapy course coming up. I've actually just delivered it recently to 2 people, and I train them, and I'll be training more people next year. So,
that sounds like an ideal way to learn in a really small group.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But my dream is to travel the world and teach, and to share what I've learned over the years, and just we all have our own journey and our own wisdom, and it's just my flavor. It's just the way that I see the world, and
people be attracted to that who are supposed to be, who listen to their intuition.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's brilliant. So how do people find you?
Well, I've got a website, and it's teaganfeatherapy.co.nz. It's TEAGANFEA therapy.co.nz. And I've got a YouTube channel as well, and Instagram. And I mainly find that people who come to me, their intuition has told them. Like, I've had people say to me, God, I just saw your website, or I picked up your card and I just knew I had to work with you, which is really cool. And I even have people from overseas that end up finding me, and through different sources, and I just knew I had to come and work with you. So I consider myself as an awakener. I've always had this ability since I was a child to awaken people to the truth of who they are, their beauty. And so one of the great loves in my work is actually holding space for someone and seeing them clearly for who they are, as the beautiful, profound being that they are, because most people can't see that in themselves. And so,
why we go to people, like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's why people want to be around people like you, because of being able to see that beauty of who we really are.
Yeah, and it's so sad that people can't, people can't see their own beauty, but that's part of the journey.
Sometimes it comes and goes,
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, wow, that's been really fascinating, finding out your story and your adventures along the way. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's interesting because I came back to New Zealand. I didn't really want to come back to New Zealand, but because I love Australia, but I came back for my family and because I hadn't lived here for a very long time, and I'm putting out to the universe for another adventure.
The universe will deliver, no doubt.
Like, come on, magical adventure. Maybe I'll move to Peru or, go and live somewhere crazy again.
Yeah, I guess there's plenty of places that are crazy. It's just what definition of crazy you're after.
Exactly.
Oh, thanks so much, Teagan. It was such a great. I feel like I've just sat through a great storytelling session. So all filled up with yay.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, thank you, Sarah, too. Yeah, it's always nice to share stories.
Yeah, totally. Stories are where it's at.
Welcome to the section of the show where I share some of my original music. Today's piece is a new release to the internet despite it being written 20 years ago for Christmas 2002. That Christmas even involved making angels in the snow on the front lawn at my grandmother's house in Toronto. Here's my Christmas song. It's called A Time for Sharing. Time for sharing, a time for caring, a time to be joyful on this Christmas night, a time for loving, a time for giving, a time to be grateful on this Christmas night. In some countries it's cold outside, could be 40 below. In others it's completely foreign to think of ice or snow. Whatever weather comes to you, remember truth of the day, celebration with family and friends, no matter which way. A time for sharing, a time for caring, a time to be joyful on this Christmas night, a time for loving, a time for giving, time to be grateful on this Christmas night. The snow may be softly falling, bears witness to the calling, peace and goodwill to all, the truth of the day. The sun may be brightly shining, people will be smiling, the joy that giving brings is here to stay. Time for sharing, a time for caring, a time to be joyful on this Christmas night, a time for loving, a time for giving, Time to be grateful on this Christmas night. Unraveling Midlife is brought to you from Aotearoa, New Zealand by www.sarahmarlowspence.com. Theme music is by Sarah Marlow Spence and Sarasvati Marie Willis, and art by Samantha Hepburn.